Okay, so have you guys ever felt like that whole renting versus buying thing is like impossible to figure out? I mean, seriously, it's a total headache. Everyone's got an opinion, right?
Yeah, it's a big one, for sure. People get super passionate about it. And it makes sense, it's a huge decision. Like, it really impacts your life for a
Yeah,
long time.
it's a big deal. So today we're gonna like break it all down. We're doing a deep dive into, get this, a YouTube video called Are You Ready? Renting versus buying a home, the lie you've been told.
Oh, wow. Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. And the guy who made it, he says he's a multimillionaire and he's all about renting. So I had to check it out.
I mean, you have to respect that.
Uh,
Challenging the usual way of thinking, especially with something that's important. I'm into it.
Me too. And he doesn't mess around. He just comes right out and says renting isn't throwing money away, which, let's be real, is what we're all taught.
Yeah.
Right.
I,
He was talking about this opportunity cost thing. Have you heard of that?
yeah, for sure. It's something people don't always think about. It's basically like every dollar you spend on rent could be invested somewhere else, potentially making you more money.
That's what I thought. It's like that $2,000 a month example he used. He was like, wouldn't that money be making you more money in the stock market instead of being stuck in a mortgage?
Exactly. It's about figuring out what lines up with like your own risk tolerance, right?
Mhm.
Where do you see the best chance to grow your money?
Okay, so let's get into those like housing myths he was talking about. Myth number one, you're just paying your landlord's mortgage. I'll admit, I totally believed that one for a while.
Oh, yeah. It's a common one for sure. But honestly, it's way more complicated than that. Like, yeah, your landlord's mortgage matters, but it's not the only thing determining your rent. There's
Right.
like market value, how much your other place is renting for, property taxes, those are the worst,
Yeah.
maintenance, and even how desirable the location is. It all factors in.
It's like that condo you talked about, the one in Palo Alto. It sold for like $2.15 million. Can you imagine that mortgage payment?
Okay, let's do some quick math. Even with a big down payment, like 20%, which is a lot, you're still looking at more than $10,000 a month.
Wow.
And on top of that, you got property taxes.
Which, in Palo Alto, forget about it.
Insane, right. And he compared that to renting a similar place for like $5,400. Suddenly, renting doesn't seem so bad. It makes you think about all the hidden costs of owning. He called them phantom costs, which I love, because they really can be like invisible until they get you.
Totally. Which brings us to myth number two. Paying rent is just throwing your money away. Okay, be honest, some months it definitely feels that way. But he had a really interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, right? Like,
Yeah.
think about it this way. When you go out to eat and you have an amazing meal, are you throwing money away?
I
You're paying for an experience,
Yeah.
for convenience, for someone to cook for you. Renting is kind of the same. You're paying for a roof over your head, for a place to live, and you have the flexibility to move when you want.
That's a good point. It's not just about building equity all the time. It's about choosing what works for you and your life right now.
Speaking of equity, he tackles this myth, too, that buying a house is the only way to build wealth. Okay, so owning can be a good investment.
Mm.
But he talks about something most people forget: time.
Yes. Like you got to think long term. It can take forever to build up real equity in a house. He brings up those amortization tables. Have you seen those things?
Yeah, those are intense.
They are, but they really show you how long it takes. You could be paying mostly interest for years before you even make a dent in the principal.
And it's easy to forget that when you're caught up in the excitement of buying a place, right? Like, I'm building equity.
Yeah.
But you could be making smarter moves with your money somewhere else.
For sure. I even wrote down this quote. He said, "Don't pay a dollar to make a dime." Basically, don't get so focused on equity that you miss out on other opportunities to grow your money.
Right, you got to be smart about it. Homeownership can be great, but it's not the only path to building wealth.
Okay, so this is where the video got really interesting for me. He said, even if, after you look at all the numbers, buying seems like the right choice financially, you have to ask yourself two questions before you jump in.
Ooh, okay. I like this. What are the questions?
Question number one, can you really afford it? And he doesn't just mean, can you get a mortgage? He's talking about your income, your debt. Like,
Yeah.
can you truly afford it? He uses the 28-36 rule, which we should totally talk about. And question number two, have you saved a 20% down payment?
Those are such good questions. It's more than just like qualifying on paper, right? It's about having your financial act together.
Exactly. So let's talk about this 28-36 rule because he's like obsessed with it. Can you break it down for us?
Totally. So it means your total housing costs should be less than 28% of your income before taxes. And that includes all those phantom costs we talked about, not just the mortgage.
Okay, so if I'm making, say, $5,000 a month before taxes, my housing cost shouldn't be more than like $1,400.
You got it.
And what about the 36 part?
Ah, yeah, that's your debt-to-income ratio, or DTI. So all your monthly debt payments, your potential mortgage, credit cards, student loans, car payments, everything, should be less than 36% of your gross monthly income. Lenders use it to see if you can actually handle the payments.
Got it. So again, if I'm making $5,000, my total debt payments should be under $1,800. It really puts things into perspective because it's not just about the mortgage itself. It's about managing everything.
Exactly. You have to find a balance between what you earn and what you owe, especially if you're going to add a mortgage on top of it.
He made a good point that even if you technically qualify for a bigger mortgage, stretching beyond that 2836 limit can be really risky. Like, what happens if you lose your job?
Yes.
Or your house needs a major repair?
Right. You need to have some wiggle room in your finances.
Yeah.
He actually suggested that, ideally, you should still be able to save around 5% to 10% of your take-home pay and invest about 10% even after you factor in those housing costs.
Which is a great reminder that, yeah, owning a house can be part of building wealth, but it's not the only way. You have to be smart with your money in all areas.
Totally. It's like a reality check. Like, yeah, you can technically afford this, but is it putting you in a good position overall? Probably not.
Right. Okay, so question number 2 he asks is, have you saved a 20% down payment? And, okay, real talk, in some places, saving that much money feels impossible.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Especially for first-time buyers. Some markets are just, like, insane. But see, I don't think it's really about the exact number. It's more about showing yourself and the bank that you're disciplined. You can save money consistently.
So it's more about proving you have good financial habits, even
Yeah.
if you end up putting down a different amount.
Yeah, exactly. Like, think of it as building those saving muscles. If you can set aside money for a big goal, that's a skill that'll help you no matter what. Buying a house, starting a business, retiring early, it all starts with saving.
That's a good point. And he talks about how once you own a house, there's always something, like unexpected costs pop up all the time. So being prepared is key.
All the time. And those costs, they add up fast.
For sure. He did mention that, like, okay, there are times when maybe 20% isn't necessary. Like if interest rates are super low, maybe it makes more sense to invest that money, which got me thinking, like, what if you split the difference? Put some towards a down payment, some towards investments.
I love that. That's what he's all about, right? Being strategic.
Yeah.
It's your money. You got to make it work for you. Remember the opportunity cost we talked about?
Yes. Where's my money going to grow the most?
Exactly. So even with your down payment, you have options. Do your research. Maybe talk to a financial advisor. There's no right or wrong answer, just what's right for you.
Okay, so after all this, the myths, the numbers, the tough questions, what's the big takeaway here?
I think he just wants people to understand buying isn't always the right answer, and renting isn't always throwing money away. It's different for everyone, depending on your goals, what you want your life to look like.
Right. You have to decide what matters most to you. Oh. And I love this one line he had. Rent is the maximum you will pay, but a mortgage is the minimum you will pay. Like, whoa.
Yeah, it's so true, though. With rent, you know what you're paying each month. Owning a house, those
Yeah.
costs can be unpredictable.
Exactly. You could get stuck with a huge repair bill, your property taxes could go up. All that stuff adds up. I have friends who bought this fixer-upper thinking it was a steal, and then, surprise, those hidden costs weren't so hidden anymore.
Yep, it happens all the time.
It's a good reminder that you need a plan. You need to have some savings, but be able to handle those curveballs. But also, there are other reasons to buy a house, right? It's not always just about the money.
Well, for sure. Like
Yeah.
maybe you want to live in a specific school district for your kids, or you need more space for your family. Those are totally valid reasons. And don't forget the emotional side. Owning a home can feel really good. You can make it your own, put down roots.
Totally. It's about more than just the money sometimes. He even said buying a house doesn't always mean building wealth, which is huge.
Right. It doesn't always. Like sometimes it's just about having a place that feels like home.
So how do you know when it's the right time to buy? Even if, like, financially, it might not be the absolute best move on paper.
I think it goes back to what we were saying before. What are your priorities? Like, do you value stability more than anything? Maybe putting down roots is more important to you right now than making the smartest financial decision.
Yeah. It's about, like, your gut feeling, too. Is it the right move for you right now? What was your biggest takeaway from the video? Like, what really stuck with you?
Honestly, I think it's just, like, don't be afraid to go against the grain. Everyone says you have to buy a house. But what if that doesn't work for you? What if you're happy renting? Or you decide to wait a few years and invest your money first? There's no shame in that.
Love that. And that's what he talks about, right?
Yeah.
You could take that money you'd put towards a down payment and invest it. Start that business you've always wanted. Travel the world.
Exactly. Renting can give you that freedom. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be strategic.
Right. It's like a whole new perspective. It's
Mm.
not about waiting around to buy. It's about making the most of where you are right now.
Exactly. Okay, so for anyone listening who's trying to figure this out, to rent or buy, what's like one piece of advice you'd give them?
Ooh, good question.
Don't just assume buying a house is the only answer. Do your research, crunch your own numbers, and most importantly, listen to your gut. What feels right to you?
It's like you just know, even if it doesn't make sense on paper.
Yeah, sometimes it's those things you can't really measure. Feeling settled, having a place that's truly yours, that's important too.
Totally. It's your life, right? You
Yeah.
have to make it work for you. This video really got me thinking differently about this whole renting versus buying thing. There's no right answer for everyone, just what's right for you in this moment.
Exactly. And hey, maybe that means renting for longer than you thought you would.
Like being okay with the long game.
Totally. You could take that down payment money and invest it. Maybe you retire early
Yeah.
or finally take that dream trip.
Right. It's not wasted time. It's like you're setting yourself up for something even better.
Exactly. So many people think renting is like a failure, but it can be really smart if you use that time to your advantage.
Okay, that is such a good point. It's like flipping the script.
Right. It's all about perspective. What works for your friend or even that guy in the video might not work for you. And that's
I think
okay.
It's about tuning out all that noise and figuring out what you want. Okay, so for everyone listening who's like in the middle of this whole rent or buy dilemma, what's like one thing you'd tell them?
Don't just assume you have to buy a house. Seriously, question everything. Look at your finances. See what makes sense for you. And most importantly, trust your gut. What feels right?
Because at the end of the day, it's about more than just owning a house. It's about like creating a life you love.
Right, yeah.
It's-
100%. It's your life, your journey.
Love it. And on that note of like taking control, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the crazy world of renting versus buying.
Yes. But keep thinking about it
Yeah.
and keep asking those questions.
Exactly. Don't just listen to us or anyone. Do what feels right for you. Okay, until next time, keep those brains working, and we will be back with another deep dive soon.